Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ryan Banks and my channel is about financial tips and tricks that you can bank on. And I post videos every second Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So today I'm going to be going over what you need to know to file your own tax return. And I'm going to be going over the 5 pieces of information that you need to file your own return. And I'm going to be going over the 10 most common areas that we need to fill out for a tax return so I can help you through different sections of what to fill out. So before I start the video, I just wanted to let you know that I will be using Turbotax for all the different screenshots that you'll be seeing. And I'm using this because I believe it's the most user-friendly tax software out there, because it asks you different questions and then based off what you answer, it will pre-populate the different forms that you need to fill out. And for someone who doesn't know too much about personal taxes or the rules surrounding that, it makes it very easy for you to file your own tax return. Now you can see on your screen the 5 pieces of information that you need to file your own tax return. So number 1, you need your full address. Number 2, you need your SIN number so you can find out on any tax slip that you receive. Number 3, you need your previous year notice of assessment. So if I'm filing for my 2021 tax return, I have a 2020 notice of assessment if I filed a tax return last year. Number 4, all the different tax slips that I receive. So for example, from your employment income, investments, and etc. And number 5, you need all the receipts that you have for any expenses that you can deduct on your tax return. So for example, your rent receipts, your charitable donations, and medical expenses, and more if there's some that are eligible. So now I'm going to be referring to these pieces of information later down the video so you can understand why you need these pieces of information. Now you can see on your screen the 10 common areas I'm going to be covering today. And you can see that they're all time-stamped. So this would be a good time if you want to pause the video and you only want to listen to a certain section I'm going to be covering today. Now let's jump into the first section of filling out your personal information in TurboTax. So you can see on the screen that you can input your first and last name, your date of birth, your SIN number, which is one of the pieces of information that you require. Then you can do a drop-down menu of which language you want to pick between French and English. And then there's a few yes or no questions below that. And then right under that, you will see a box for an 8-digit code from your notice of assessment. So that's why you need your notice of assessment, is to be able to file your tax return because it needs that code. So you can find this code on your 2020 notice of assessment if you're filing for 2021, assuming that you filed your 2020 tax return. So it will be on the top right corner on the first page, and it will be right below the date, and it will be a combination of capital letters and numbers. So it will be 8 digits long. And finally, the last piece of personal information you need to put in is your address. So you can fill in all the required fields in that section. So once you're done inputting your general information into TurboTax, TurboTax will ask you a series of different questions of asking what kind of information you need to fill out this year. So for example, it's going to ask you if you're employed in 2021. And if you say yes, a drop-down menu will show up and ask what kind of income that you had when you were employed. And most likely it's a T4, so you'll click the T4, and later down in the tax return, it's going to populate information for you to input into your T4. So it's going to ask a whole bunch of series of questions, and then you'll be able to fill out the appropriate information you need for this year's tax return. Once you're done that section, it's going to ask you if you want to import information from CRA. So this is a very useful tool because you're able to get all your T slips or all your tax slips from CRA, and it gets automatically imported into TurboTax so that you don't need to input all the different boxes there are for each of your tax slips. So this reduces the risk of input error, which I find very useful. And you can only do this if you have an account with CRA. So I would suggest for you to get one of those accounts if you don't already have one. So now let's jump into the employment income section. So now on your screen, you can see the checklist for you to input your information if you were employed in 2021. So now on your screen, you can see the information you need to input into TurboTax if you didn't do the CRA import. So I filled in just a quick example, just random numbers, but those are the fields that are most likely going to apply to you when you have a T4. Now let's jump into the fourth subject, which is investment income. So right now you can see the checklist for it, and I use the most generic or the most common T-slip that you would get for investment income, which is a T5. So now you can see on the screen all the different types of boxes that you can input into a T5. So for this example, I just put dividend income from your investments, but you can also get interest income, for example, or the types of income that a T5 applies. Now I'm going to be going over RSP withdrawal section. So more specifically, I'll be going over the T4 RIF slip that you would receive if you took out money out of your RSPs. So right now you can see the checklist for that and all the different types of options. But now you can see that all the different information that you can input in all the different various boxes. So most likely you just took out X amount of money and then a certain percentage gets deducted based off the amount that you take out every year. Now I'm going to be going over rental income, which is probably one of the more complicated sections to fill out of your tax return. So now you can see the checklist that you need to click to be able to pre-populate that later down the tax return once you're at that section. So once you do get to that section, this is the form that's going to show up. So first it's going to ask you the specific dates that you rented during the year. So if you rented for the full year, you can say January 1st to December 31st for that year. But if you only rented for partial of the year, then you put those specific dates that you rented. Then it's going to ask you the address of your rental property. So you need to input that. Then it's going to ask you to input the number of units that you're renting and the total gross income. So for this exercise, I own a duplex, and which is 2 units, and I rent $1,000 a month, which I rented for the full year, which is $24,000. Now, once you're done that section, you can scroll down to the expenses section, and you can input any expenses that are directly related to your rental income. So examples are house insurance, mortgage interest, repairs and maintenance. So if your basement floods, then all the expenses related to repairing that can be claimed. You can also claim your property taxes and also utilities if the landlord pays for those expenses. But the one thing that you need to keep in mind is if you're renting the house that you live in, so if you live upstairs and the tenant's downstairs, you can only claim the percentage that the tenant uses in the house. So for example, if you have a 1,200 square foot house and the basement's 600 square feet and that's where the tenant is renting from, then you could claim 50% of those expenses. Now, if you click to the next section, or if you go next, once you're done inputting all those expenses, there's going to be a vehicle section, which is very uncommon, but you can put if you have some vehicle expenses. And then you will have a UCC or capital cost allowance section, which means your property is considered an asset and it's depreciable. So you can claim CCA if you input the beginning UCC, which is the total cost of the building, and if you didn't claim any CCA in the past. So the one thing you need to remember is if your expenses are higher than your gross rental income, then you can't claim any CCA for that year. But let's say you make $5,000 and you click the specific class and you're able to claim $6,000 of CCA, then it's only going to claim $5,000 and bring you to zero net rental income, which means you won't be taxed on any of that. Now the next section I'm going to be going over is RSP contributions. So right now you can see the checklist that you need to click to be able to fill out that information later on your tax return. And when you get to that section, this is the first page that's going to show up. It's going to ask you your RSP contribution limit at the end of 2020. So you can find this information in your Notice of Assessment of 2020, which is one of the pieces of information you need to be able to file your tax return. Then when you click Next, this is the second page that's going to show up. And it's going to first input what your institution name is that you got the slip from. Then it's going to give you a drop-down menu if you contributed from March to December or January to the end of February, beginning of March of the following year. And if you're unsure how that kind of works, you can see my RRSP contribution video. So once you input that information, then you input the amount of RRSP contributions that you made, and you can also make some contributions for your spouse if you'd like to. Now I'm going to be going over donation receipts. So right now you can see the checklist that you need to click if you made donations during the year. And when you do get to that section, this is the screen that's going to show up, and you can input those manually one by one if you made multiple donations. So you just need to put the organization's name and the amount that you contributed. Then if you made more than one, then you go add new donation. Now I'm going to be going over tuition fees. So if you paid tuition fees during the tax year, you're going to have to fill out this specific checklist. Then once you get to that section, you're going to see this form. So first you get to put the institution or the college or university name. Then you can input the number of tuition fees that you paid. So it's either within Canada or outside of Canada. Then it's going to ask you the number of months that you were full-time or part-time. So this you'll be able to see on your T2202 form. But if you imported that information from CRA, that will be all inputted automatically. Now, one of the last sections I'm going to be going over today is if you paid property taxes or if you paid rent during the year. So this is the checklist that you need to fill out if you paid those expenses during the year. So once you do get to that section, this is what the form looks like. It's going to ask you for the address that you paid the property taxes or that you paid rent from. Then it's going to ask you for the number of months that you were there renting or that you were living if you pay property taxes. Then it's going to ask you for the amount. And then it's going to ask you for a drop-down menu of what kind of expenses was it. So property taxes, rent, or other. Then it's going to ask you for the landlord's name if it's applicable. But the one thing that you need to keep in mind is this type of deduction is a non-refundable tax credit. Now, the last thing I'm going to go over with you today is the review section of TurboTax. So this is one of the great things I like about TurboTax is that it gives you warnings or errors for you to fix. So when I say warnings, that means suggestions based off the information you inputted earlier on in a tax return. And if the software picked up any errors, it's going to tell you to fix them before you get to be able to file your tax return. Wow, that was a lot of information at you. But if you did last this long, I just want to thank you for listening all of this way. It's greatly appreciated. And if you're trying to fill out your own tax return, or if you have any general questions for me, you can put them down in the comments, or you can email me at ryanbankcpa@gmail.com, and I can answer your questions on a more one-on-one basis. But I do want to hear from you if that you found these tricks very helpful. If you want to like the video and give it a thumbs up, that'd be greatly appreciated. And if you want to subscribe, you're going to be able to get a notification whenever I come out with new videos. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope everyone has a great day.